Welcome back, folks. It's Jon Najarian for The Rebel's Edge. And Pete and I are going to be breaking down for you why the CPI, Consumer Price Index, at 3.2 was bad for the idea that we'd see a 50 basis point cut in September, just 7 days from now. You want to know why? Stay tuned for The Rebel's Edge. Bang! Bang.
All right. Well, what city are you in now? Which one?
New York.
I'll tell you what, your miles at the end of the year are ridiculous.
Yeah. Closing in on 500,000, by the way.
I believe it.
Welcome, folks. We appreciate all of you joining us. Pete and I are going to break down the annual core consumer price inflation, which remains steady at 3.2%, Pete. That's our macro minute today. And why is that not great? Well, because they expected it to drop to 3, really, Pete. And the fact that they didn't means the odds of a 50 basis point cut fell to just 15% now, Pete. We were almost even a week ago. Now we're at 85-15, 85%, 25 basis point cut, 15% on the 50 basis point cut. That is your macro minute.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right, John. I mean, the CPI number, obviously, the markets got hit. They got hit pretty daggone hard. You take a look over at the Dow specifically, and the Dow was down well over 600 points, nearly 700 points. And we've seen that time and time again. Here's the interesting thing. Even with that kind of a move, and you look at the S&P, and that was getting just slaughtered as well. You take a look over at volatility, it really wasn't bouncing around as much. But to focus on CPI, I think that is amazing how this catalyst has become so big for the CPI. And tomorrow we got the PPI. So it never stops, John, but this data in front of the Fed, and I'll tell you what, when you talked about what those numbers look like right now, those numbers are pretty amazing how quickly that just flashed. I mean, it was 50-50 to your point, and it seemed like it was leaning towards more and more the opportunity for maybe 50 basis points. That's long gone. I think you and I have been saying for a while now, it's going to be a quarter point. Just live with it. I think we've been right about that for a while.
Yeah, we have. And it'll be even more interesting, Pete, like you say, the producer price, to see if it reflects the same. In other words, it didn't drop on the producer level as much either. Then it's just going to go to 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, right now they're holding out hope, but I still think it's going to be a sell event, Pete, when we get 25 bips, because it's going to be priced in.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about futures, and I'm going to go with Pete's favorite, not the VIX, cocoa. I'm going to say cocoa being up another 6% today. Apparently, Pete, that's some sort of a cure for what ails the market. You're going to buy chocolate because cocoa demand is back, baby, and it's up over $7,000 right now. 7718 is where cocoa futures are trading right now, up $447 in the last 24 hours.
And it's got the medical side as well, so it's dual purpose. It's a little bit like silver, where it's a big part of the semiconductor world, but it's precious metal as well. Fantastic future for me, John. It is the VIX, and I think this is why. The range has truly kind of come down, and it's been constricting. And I'd say it's basically 19 to 20. Now, the pushback from people would be, well, but Pete, it hit 21 today. Yeah, it did for a minute, and then it was gone. And then it fell right back underneath 20 again, and it was, call it 1960, somewhere in there. So until we start to see that expand and hold on, I think we're looking at a VIX right now that makes total sense at 19 to 20, because basically it's telling us S&P move is going to be a little bit bigger than 1%. Well, today, when we were down at those lows, it was decently over that 1%, and that's the markets we're in today.
Well, as you guys know, we break down the moves in stocks and let you know what we think of those stocks afterwards. I'm going to say Rentokil, Pete, RTO. We have been on this one to the upside, and now it's to the downside. We did not have unusual activity, I don't think, Pete, in this one. But the reason that it's down so hard today, over 20%, what do? Basically, it's pest control. They issued a profit warning, and it's not like the pests are taking a break. So if they're not spending the money on Rentokil, Pete, what does that mean? We're going to have more pests in restaurants and the like, because even though they do your home as well, we're talking about, big industrial users are cutting back dramatically, and their growth for North America, it's going to be 1%, Pete, 1%. Yeah. So that's pretty strong sign that people are still cutting back dramatically on their spending.
Yeah, no doubt about it. They talked about exactly what you just brought up, that revenue and the growth being 1%. That's pretty pathetic. They got higher costs going in. They did over expansion spending, the sales and the services. So they've really put themselves in a bit of a bind right now, John. I'm sitting there looking at this thing going, wow, higher expenses, probably not a great thing when you've got profits that are something that they had to put out there. Hey, we're putting out that warning. Is the stock down nearly to the 52-week lows? Yep. It's sitting right around 25 bucks, 52-week low, 23. So 25 to 23, pretty damn close when you're looking at 37 for the upside. I'm telling you, John, this is one where I don't see a reason now to try to think you're going to bottom pick it. I'm not sure it's hit the bottom yet. It might take a few months before, if they can turn things around, but that's a big if right now.
Well, I would not be putting my toe into that trap, Pete. So I'm stepping away from Rentokil RTO as well. All right, GameStop, down dramatically. This one, of course, is one of those meme stocks that Roaring Kitty had pushed pretty hard, Pete. It went all the way from a low of 10 bucks all the way up to as high as 64 bucks. Well, now it's 20, and it's down some, 15%, Pete, at mid-session. Basically, Q2 results, net sales, $598 million, a substantial decrease from the previous year and below expectations. So that's a pretty big miss. And I'm surprised in a way, Pete, that it's even holding just a 15% loss, because it seems more like it. If it wasn't a meme stock, it wouldn't even be here anymore.
And Roaring Kitty is the one that gave this thing another boost very recently. And it's pretty interesting. Stock made a nice move up over 24. I think it might even got close to 25. But since that moment, it's basically been down, 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 and it kind of held around a little bit. But now, obviously, today, one thing that I think is maybe the reason why it's at least holding up a little bit above that 52-week low, John, is they did raise $3 billion back in May and June by selling some of the shares when it got pretty pumped up earlier in this year. So I think that's one thing that stands out. The revenue drop, though, that's terrible. On the other hand, they had a profit. I mean, that is something that's a little unusual for these guys. So I think that I'm mostly going to say this is negative. The one positive would be the profit. But when their revenues dropped this substantially, that's not a good sign. And I think this is something where, even with Roaring Kitty, I'm not so sure that this is a name that people want to start sniffing around at these levels right now.
Yeah, it's not one that I want either, Pete. It's just not, I don't understand the business model. I know that Roaring Kitty keeps pushing out why the model makes sense. To me, it never really has. All right, let's talk about
stock.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Let's talk about MicroStrategy. Stock was down fairly hard earlier, Pete. In fact, traded all the way down, let me see, to 121. It's $7 off that low, and only down less than $1 right now at mid-session. So that's pretty good. Bitcoin recovered from about a 2% drop to being slightly positive. So could that be part of it? Well, there is a strong correlation, of course. There always has been between this and Bitcoin in particular. But the fact that Bitcoin isn't down is one of the reasons that this one is why people that want to trade crypto trade either MicroStrategy, Coinbase, or Riot blockchain for the most part, Pete. Mara, I guess, as well.
Yeah. Well, and we all know about Michael Saylor, right? I mean, that's a big deal. And the numbers that he has put out there, John, not just personally, but the company itself. I mean, the numbers of Bitcoin has been absolutely outrageous. Now, he's also talked about something that I don't know how many people had a chance to see this the other day, but he's talking about a $13 million is where he thinks the level could be in 2045. That's a long ways out. I don't know how any of us could project something like that, but Michael Saylor, I'll tell you, you got to just look at the history that he's had. So far, so good. This is a guy who accumulated quite a bit of Bitcoin. The company accumulated quite a bit of Bitcoin. So I don't know. I know there's a lot of guys shooting against him on some of the numbers, but I'm not ready to do that because this guy's been right pretty consistently so far since 2020. That's a 4-year run. Is he going to get a little bit thrown off? Maybe a little bit, but I think this guy's been probably as sharp when it comes to Bitcoin as anybody, maybe even a little bit stubborn. But when he's talking about the Bitcoin getting up to those kind of levels, John, and maybe even up over 90,000 if Trump were to win, that says a lot.
Yeah. And I think it almost is a binary thing, Pete, because Kamala Harris is not a fan of cryptocurrency in any fashion except CBDC, which is central bank digital currency. I was just talking about it with Andrew Brill over at Wealthion, that the CBDCs are not favored by most of us that like crypto because we like A, decentralized, and B, we like the fact that it's your money, it stays in your wallet, and nobody can control it. But a central bank digital currency, the government could indeed control when and where you could spend it. So, yeah, I would say that if you like the idea that President Trump becomes president again, all of these stocks, Coinbase, as well as MicroStrategy, Mara, all of them move to the upside along with Bitcoin. Yep. All right, Pete, let's talk about lithium. Albemarle, key player in the lithium market, basically contemporary Amperex Technologies, that's CATL, it's a major Chinese battery manufacturer. They may suspend their mining operations. Well, if supply and demand still works, Pete, which I think it does, if you have demand and then you've got supply, and if all of a sudden you cut the amount of supply and the demand stays the same, prices go up. It's that simple, folks. So it's up almost 10% today. Analysts at UBS saying the same things that I just said. So would you be a buyer here, Pete? Because it's a long way from the 52-week high.
Yeah, I think so, John. Matter of fact, there's all kinds of different lithium folks out there that we know of. And as a matter of fact, we had some unusual buying just earlier in the weekend, ALTM. Now, what's interesting about that is that stock's up about 11% today. That's a big move. This is a stock that's very inexpensive, and we did have some call buying in there, John. They were buying the 2.5 calls in there out in October. They were like at 10 cents or something like that. It was underneath 2.5. I think it was about 230 at the time. It got over 250 today. Those moved all the way up. Doesn't sound like a huge number, but to 30 cents. Well, when you think about it on a percentage basis, that ain't so bad. And so that one was pretty interesting to see. And especially because if the Chinese are going to back off in the production side of this, that's talking about 5,000 to 6,000 metric tons per month that gets taken away. I would say that that's probably fairly bullish across the board for most everybody in lithium right now. That's a pretty big number. And I think for that reason, looking over at everything that goes on and Elon Musk and all of that and the demands that there are out there, I think this is a reason to really take a look at these lithium stocks and see which ones still have some room to run.
Well, let's switch over to sports, Pete. Mm-hmm. And maybe we have some good news for a former #1 pick, according to your notes, Pete.
Well, I thought it would be fun just to go in. We got game one, week one out of the way, right? And we got a chance to see everybody. Now, a lot of the teams played crappy teams. It's hard to really analyze. The Minnesota Vikings went out to the Giants. The Giants with Daniel Jones, they don't really throw all that well, John. Matter of fact, he's got 60 touchdowns but 40 interceptions last year. So this is a guy that we paid a lot of money, didn't do too well. He had 2 picks in the game. You look at Hurts at Philadelphia, he had 2 picks in the game. Tua, Miami, he threw for a pick as well. It's interesting to see how much money that we're paying these, or they're paying these quarterbacks, and some of the production levels that just don't live up to that right now. Well, Baker Mayfield is not making the gigantic money that a lot of these guys are making, but he's doing okay. But so far, John, 80% completion. He's thrown 4 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. I would say he's doing something right. He threw the ball 30 times. They did a really nice job. Derek Carr played pretty well for New Orleans, but the problem is they're playing against Carolina. You and I could play against Carolina at quarterback and probably do pretty well. So I think it's interesting to see how well Baker Mayfield started off. He finished last year nice. He played very well, and it looks like they're back. And I think Tampa could be pretty interesting, and New Orleans, quite frankly. What about you?
Well, still continue to be impressed with Daniels, Pete, with Richardson, with the Colts, Anthony Richardson, who, unfortunately was hurt a lot last year. That really hurt the team a lot. CJ Stroud for the Texans, Pete. Obviously, Baker Mayfield, you said it. And yesterday you mentioned Derek Carr. His stats, by the way, Pete, 19 of 23, 200 yards passing, 3 TDs, 0 interceptions. So, yeah, he looked pretty damn good. But like you said, maybe you, I don't know about me, Pete, maybe you'd look pretty good at playing quarterback against the Panthers. That is a pathetic football team, that's for sure.
Even with this bum arm, I might be able to throw a few touchdowns against Carolina. That's how bad they are. Poor David Tepper, man, those guys, he needs to let somebody on the football side make some of those decisions for him, because those trades have built up a lot of different franchises by now, John. Very similar to what happened with Cleveland and what they did when they went to get Deshaun Watson, quite frankly. Same type of thing. They helped others get a lot better, and they got a lot worse, unfortunately. All right, NCAA football, John. I want the best team in each conference of the Big Four. So the ACC, I'll give you this. I got Miami, but Boston College is right on their heels right now. Miami looks pretty damn good. Transfer quarterback. They're playing well, but Boston College, these guys are like blue collar and banging people around. It's early. It's really early, but those are the 2 for the ACC. Big 12, Utah. They're the most underrated team maybe in the country. Got a heck of a quarterback. I think in the Big 10, you still got to go with Ohio State, but I'm really impressed right now with USC and what they look like early on. Now, it's early, so you don't want to jump to too many conclusions. And the SEC, I look at a Georgia team that they're good, they're great. I don't know who's going to buy, somebody might be able to get them, but I don't know if it's going to be Texas, who looks great, Ole Miss, who looks fantastic, or Bama, who's just consistently always great. What do you think, John? Do I got the right teams, or do you got some schools that you think are a little bit better in those conferences?
No, I think you got the right teams, Pete. And I think Texas, just love them.
Yeah.
Love Ewers. Manning, we'll see. But, I think Texas, the fact that you go into Michigan, Pete, and they did what Nebraska did, Pete. They went and they planted their flag in the Big M in the Michigan Stadium, which Michigan did not appreciate, but couldn't do a damn thing about it. Texas is a team that is loaded.
Yeah.
Not only do they have some of the highest NIL contracts out there, Pete, other than Ohio State. I think it's Ohio State and Texas with the most money they're paying these players. But I think both of them have great teams, Texas and Ohio State. Georgia, yep, you're right there. I know that you've always been a fan for the last 3-4 years, Pete, of Missouri. They are looking sharp still and moving up the rankings consistently. That's a team that when they moved to the SEC made a huge difference on recruiting, I think, Pete. Because instead of being in there, with the Oklahoma States and the Oklahomas and the Nebraskas and all that kind of stuff. All this, or, back in those days. Yeah, I know Nebraska's in the Big Ten now, but I think that was a difference for Missouri when they decided we're going to go in there long before everybody started jumping conferences like they're doing. So Missouri, Ole Miss, Ohio State, Texas, those are four of the teams that I really like right now.
I got two guys that I'll just throw out at you that I think are the most underrated, because everybody talks about Shedeur Sanders, right? And they talk about yours, and they talk about a lot of different quarterbacks around for all the right reasons, some really good quarterbacks. Who's the most underrated? Well, there's two of them maybe. I'm going to give you Carson Beck down there at Georgia. The kid's 6'5". John, he's only got 70% completion. He's thrown 7 touchdowns. You know how many interceptions? 0. This guy knows how to throw the football, and he knows how to throw it to the right team, and he's shown that in previous years. And yet, he kind of gets kicked to the side a lot. And I also think that Cameron Rising from Utah, he's another one. He's got 7 touchdowns, no interceptions. He's pretty accurate, and Utah is a really competitive team that everybody forgets about them. They just are that forgotten school because they're all the way in Utah, and everybody always thinks, well, it's just BYU, that's it. No, Utah is pretty damn good, and this kid is a player, and they might have one of the best coaches in all of college football there.
Yep. No disagreement, Pete. By the way, the coaches poll has Utah 10th. Utah in the sports writers, Pete. Where is that? Only 12th, I guess. I thought it was further than that. But there is definitely a difference when you're looking what the coaches think of the teams and which ones they don't want to play, basically, versus the sports writers.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome.
Well, make sure you check out the Rebel Mastermind down in Florida, folks. It is the October 11th Mastermind event. Pete and I will be there. Grant Cardone will be there. We've got, let me see, Pete, Larry McDonald, Steve Kalajian, Ryan Mastro. We've got Liz Clayman will be there. I mentioned Grant Cardone already. Charlie Gasparino will be there, Pete. General Anthony Tata will be there. Talk about discipline. A guy who's a multi-star general and was number 3 in the Trump Defense Department. Going to be laying down some pretty serious discipline for everybody, and it'll be a great event. You can dial 888-809-8058. That's 888-809-8058. And Pete and I will be back tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Bang.